So just to talk about root barriers real quick, there's kind of two types of root barriers, physical and chemical root barriers, or physical root barriers, and many of them, or some of them I should say, are impregnated with chemicals to prevent or inhibit root growth. And those are just, to prevent the roots from penetrating the membrane and potentially causing leaks. We talked about many of the single-ply systems don't require root barrier. Modified or asphalt systems do require root barriers. And the physical root barriers I showed you up here is the blue or black, right, or clear. 10 to 20 foot wide widths, 100-foot lengths, a big roll, and you just kind of place it on top and overlap those seams by 5 feet, assuming that sedum isn't going to have a 5-foot root that's going to go over and try and penetrate that membrane, or trees or whatever, you might actually get seedlings growing up there. And the example here, you guys seen this now quite a few times, cap sheet. So that's our asphalt cap sheet that I showed you here. Root barrier, then there's our insulation. So that's fairly cut and dry, I guess, on the physical root barriers. The chemical root barriers are another thing. And what we just basically say is that they're not really allowed in Portland because we don't know. We're asking manufacturers to prove that their chemicals do not leach out over time. And remember, when we're talking about over time, we're talking about the lifetime of this eco-roof, so 40 to 60 years. And if they can show us that this chemical that they've impregnated in this root barrier to inhibit root growth is not going to leach out and contaminate our waterways, because, of course, we're battling all the other elements of or products of an eco-roof and being sure that those are environmentally sound. And to date, we haven't had any manufacturers provide that information, and so we haven't seen the root barrier installed in too many, or chemical root barriers installed in too many of our eco-roofs.
And this relates to that question that you asked earlier. So this is one place where we said, okay, because of us promoting eco-roofs, this concept has come into our environment of putting chemicals up on the roof to solve this root problem. So we said, as Dave just pointed out, we just said, okay, we can't tell somebody you can't do something, but we can ask them to show us that their product is not going to cause a problem. Now, maybe someday we'll use that same rationale to look at other products and how we might deal with that. But at least for the time being, because there are companies that are putting copper into this stuff, and they're putting pesticides into their products. And we did have documentation from a project in Switzerland where there was a company that was putting pesticides back in the 1980s, as this was getting started in Switzerland. And they actually did tests, and they found that pesticide was leaching out and going into the receiving water. And so then they banned it in their country. So
on his trees, on the inside of his black plastic container, uses zinc. And that prevents...
Well, there's zinc, copper, various other things, and so it doesn't matter what they use. We just say if it's a chemical, you have to give us documentation that it's not going to leach out into the drainage system, whatever it might be. A lot of them use copper.
Yeah, copper's common.